Aloha and welcome to Talkin Trash. I'm Max Richardson.
And I'm Allison Fraley.
And in today's episode, we're talking about what motivates people to recycle.
The following program is a production of Ho'ike Kauaʻi Community Media.
You know, I'm actually really excited to do this episode. I've been wanting to pick your brain about the psychology of recycling ever since the very first episode we did when you mentioned that this was the subject of your master's degree. But before we begin, make sure you take a moment to subscribe to Ho'ike on YouTube or your podcast app of choice for even more great content. Stay connected, stay inspired, and keep up with the stories that shape Kauaʻi. Well, I'm stoked that we get to do this topic at last.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so first things first, tell us a little bit about your background. Your master's is in social psychology, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so for my master's thesis, I studied the factors that contribute to recycling behavior. And among those things are the level of knowledge about recycling programs and demographic factors like age and race and things like that. And then also whether or not people had curbside recycling. And we looked at all of that information and found that it was the convenience of curbside recycling is what led to more recycling behavior among the people that I studied. And at that time when I did the study, there was barely any research out there about recycling behavior and what causes it. And so I really did a lot of research to find out like what are the factors, because you just think that, oh, people do it because they know about it or that it's a good thing to do and that's why they do it. But there's a lot of things that we don't think about that are reasons why people recycle and ways to motivate that behavior.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of unplumbed depth in that field of research because we know that everyone should recycle and we know that not everyone does. And
right.
Some reasons why are obvious, but sometimes you have people that have every opportunity to recycle and it's easy and they still don't. Yes. And I personally find that fascinating, like,
yes,
why?
Me too. And so, throughout the mainland U.S., well, first of all, a recent study by the Recycling Partnership found that only 50% of mainland communities do have access to curbside recycling. But among those that do have access, they're not getting the participation rates that you would imagine. When people think, if we had curbside recycling here on Kauaʻi, everyone would recycle. Well, that's not true. About half the people would actually put out their cart every week on the curb. And that's what they're seeing. And then also that people aren't, that they're putting a lot of contamination in there. Things like diapers and garden hoses and fast food packaging that's not recyclable. And so it's very problematic and messy, these curbside programs. And so there's a lot of factors, like I said, that will motivate, and then also things that are barriers to recycling. So I don't know what you want to talk about first. So.
We'll get into both of those.
Yeah,
so what is it that, we kind of touched on it already, but specifically, what is it that made, young college student Allison want to pursue this area of study?
Oh, so this was a while back, and I was concerned about climate change, and I wanted to do something to help with the whole situation and make the world a better place and make the world a greener place. And I thought that recycling was an area where I could make a difference. So that's why I started. It was just an environmental concern.
Cool. Very cool. And what was your undergrad?
It was psychology. So psychology is like super interesting to me. Yeah. And environmental psychology, research psychology, not necessarily like being a therapist, but just understanding why people do what they do was super interesting to me.
Awesome. That's, if I had gone to college, that's probably what I would have studied too. So that's cool. Something we have in common.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So started out on the psychology track, and then when you went to grad school, you were like, let's dig more into environmentalism.
Yes,
make
exactly.
the world a better place
Yep.
with psychology, which is cool. It's a cool intersection of sciences that don't overlap often. So it's good there's people out there that are making them overlap.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I've always wondered, even when I was a kid, because anecdotally, I can confirm what you were saying about curbside recycling, because until I was a teenager, I moved here when I was a teenager, but before that I lived in California, and in the Bay Area where I lived, we had curbside recycling. And, you'd go out on Friday night or whatever and put your garbage and your recycling bins out on the curb, and you look up and down the street, and like half of your neighbors aren't putting out, they just put out the garbage can. And you're like, what are you doing, dude? Like they literally can't make it any easier for you other than coming into your house and taking the empty can out of your hand. Even when it's easy, some people make the active decision not to recycle. And I've always wondered, what's up with that?
Well, they may question the effectiveness of a program. And we've heard that before, and we've talked about that on the show before too, that people think that even though they put their stuff in a recycling bin, that it just gets thrown away in the landfill anyway, which is not true. But that's what people might think. And that's why they might not recycle, is that, if I'm going to go to all this effort, it's not going to make a difference anyway. And so why should I even bother? And then another reason is, like you said, is that having two receptacles in the kitchen might be something that people don't want to deal with. They don't want to buy the extra receptacle because no municipality will do that for you, buy you an indoor receptacle. They'll buy you the outdoor receptacle, right? But the indoor, you have to deal with that. And then also I've heard people even here that are avid recyclers concerned about bugs or things like that. So maybe these mainland people that have access to a curbside program would be like, oh, it's just going to attract bugs to have an extra receptacle. I have no place to put it under my sink or wherever I normally put my trash can. So those are some of the reasons why it might not be, they might not participate.
Yeah. And from a layperson's perspective and a non-educated person's perspective, those sound an awful lot like excuses to me. Would, and maybe that's a little unkind to, or maybe if we have viewers out there that that don't recycle and feel like I'm personally attacking you, and I guess I am. Well, because why don't you?
I think we're probably preaching to the choir. I don't think anybody would tune into this if they didn't care about recycling. So that's why, it's the stuff we're going to talk about later on, I think is going to be good for those, because, preaching to the choir is kind of, not as helpful as...
Yeah. Hopefully we can change some people's minds.
We want people that don't recycle to watch this and be motivated to do it, but that might not happen,
Well, share it with your friends. Those, to me, like what you were saying about, I don't have any place to put it or whatever. I definitely know that's the kind of thing that somebody would say, but I feel like, I don't know. And this is like the armchair psychologist who didn't go to college, right, in me. But that sounds like something you would say that isn't the real reason, but you're like trying to come up with an excuse to justify because you don't really understand what your real underlying motivation is. And I wonder, as somebody who's studied it scientifically, do you know?
Well,
or do you have
there could
theories?
be other factors. Yeah, I have theories. So one would be that they don't care, and that's legitimate. Why would you go out of your way to do it's not legitimate not to care, but that's a reason, right? Because why would you go out of your way to do something that you don't care about? And certainly there are people that don't care about the environment. It's very rare here. I feel like I'm from California, so we got a lot of environmental people there, and also I've lived here for 25 years, and moving here and seeing how much everybody cares about the island, which is the environment, it's just amazing to be surrounded by so many people that love the Aina and want to protect it. And that's a real thing that's going on Kauaʻi, that we have a very high rate of just love, for this place. And so that is going to motivate a lot of behavior. So it's really hard, to think about what it's like somewhere else, where it's not so beautiful or where being outside isn't as important, that they might not have that ethic that, we should recycle to take care of the environment. And then another factor might be this excuses why is that they feel like they don't have time. It's another maybe excuse, but still, to take the time out to separate things and then to put it, and let's start to talk about here, because we don't have curbside. And we have access to programs. We have drop bins. We have 8 different locations where people can drop their recyclables. And we also have the bottle deposit law, where you can get money back for things that you paid a deposit on. So there's programs that you have access to where you can go and take your recyclables, but it is an effort. You do need to separate your materials before you get to the drop bins. You need to have several bins where you're separating your glass from your plastic, from your metals, from your papers. Yeah. And we've seen a decline too in paper recycling lately. And that we're talking paper, people aren't getting as much mail because there's more electronic stuff going on, which is fabulous. So we're talking about source reduction there. But we're generating a lot more cardboard, guys, and that's because everybody's doing,
Amazon, Etsy, Alibaba, all that stuff.
So much, and it's kind of bad, and I'm guilty of it too. But we're generating so much cardboard that people should be recycling this cardboard, and the drop bins accept those cardboard. So, if anything, I would say we're generating more cardboard, and we really need to get a handle on that. People should take the effort. And check out our website at kauaʻi.gov/recycling. Find out where the drop bin is nearest to you and use it.
Yeah, and once you build up the routine, it really isn't that much effort.
It isn't. It's a storage issue, though. It really is an issue with storage. Like I have a lot of people have carports where they can store this stuff, and that's what I do. There's inside the house. I don't even have it. I have a paper place, but that's it. Everything else is outside the house in a bin that's a mixed bin to start with, and then it's sorted out periodically. And I'm going to the bins a couple of times a month. It's not that often, but all the sorting is done, at the house.
Yeah, and so once you have that system down, it is more effort than just holding your hand out and opening it, but not much more. Like you can, and it's really easy to like you were saying, the bins are really conveniently located, the drop bins. So very rarely do I make an excursion from my house just to drop off recycling. A lot of times I'm like, I'm gonna go to the grocery store, and on the way, so I was gonna be driving anyway,
And those bins are emptied very often. It depends. Like our most active bins are the Hanalei. It's at Princeville Hanalei Transfer Station, and then also in Lihue and Kapaa. And so those bins are emptied every day. Yeah. So make use of them. We're paying for this service. We might as well use it. Yeah.
So expounding on what we just talked about, here's the $1 million question. How do we get those people that we were just talking about to start recycling or start recycling more?
So, there's tools in the tool bag when you're creating programs. So there's creating a financial incentive will definitely motivate recycling behavior. So we're talking about things like the bottle deposit law, where you get money back when you recycle. And so, but that payment needs to be kind of high for it to really work. So I'll give you an example. Here in Hawaii, when we first instituted we were doing the legislative work back in the early 2000s, and the law passed in 2005. And so when we were trying to get the law passed, which we were really lucky to get one passed, because before us, it was 20 years prior that a bottle deposit law had passed. And there's only, I think it's 10 states now that have deposit laws. It's very few, unfortunately, because these lobbyists are out there trying to stop it from happening. The beverage lobbyists do not want deposit laws. They're saying, just do curbside, you're good, don't worry about that. They're concerned that if there's any more than whatever the fee is for the beverage, people won't buy these beverages, which is silly because these beverages cost a lot more than the 5 cents or the 10 cents. Yeah. But we originally had wanted a 10-cent deposit, and there are states with 10-cent deposits that have much higher recycling rates. And that, I think, if we had a higher deposit, we'd have more recycling, because when the law was first passed, it started the rate, because we know what the rate is actually. Now for the drop-off recyclables. We don't know how many people participate even. Like, we're not out there counting people. We don't know how much stuff is generated and how versus how much is recycled. That's how you get a recycling rate, is by looking at how many people, like, so you can get a recycling rate if you're looking at a curbside program, because if the cart's out, then they're recycling. If it's not out, then they're not recycling. So you can count that and know. But with our program, our drop-in program, we have no idea.
Yeah. Is it one person putting 1 ton of cans in?
Yes.
Or is it 2,000 people putting 1 pound of cans in?
Yes, exactly. Well said. So we don't really know about that. But for the bottle deposit law, we do, because the state keeps inventory of how many deposit beverages were sold in the state, and then how many deposit beverages were redeemed. And they can track it down to the island. So we have had stats on Kauaʻi's high five recycling rate, and it started off a little below 70%, and it went up all the way to 80% about 10 years ago, and now it's dropped to less than 60%.
That's a
And
D.
it's
That's like a D minus.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
great, and I really think it's because the value of 5 cents has continued to decline all this time, and people just aren't getting, relatively as much money as they were. And so why take the time to do it?
Yeah.
So, but still, 60% is better than zero. And we were before we started that law, there was aluminum recycling, because there is scrap value to aluminum, but there was not, and we didn't know what it was. It was the same thing where people were redeeming their aluminum. We knew it was happening. We know the tonnage, but we just didn't know relative to how much was sold, But that program brought in plastic recycling and glass recycling, which was not happening before at any level. And even like our drop bins for the non-high five plastic, we'd barely get any tonnage. Of course, plastic is very light, but we don't get that much, And for aluminum, we don't get that much at all, because it's all being redeemed. Because aluminum is very easy to redeem. First of all, I only choose to buy aluminum for my single use, my alcohol. And so I buy it in the aluminum cans, and then I crush them. And so they're very easy to store before, I recycle them.
Yeah, you can fit a ton of aluminum cans in one big trash bag.
Yeah. And so that program, it works, but not as well as it would if it had a high value. A higher value. And that's a legislative issue. Every year there is some kind of proposal at the ledge to increase that fee, and we'll support it, but it doesn't pass. So
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
So that's one incentive, is an economic incentive. And we talked about convenience already, that if it's easy, then I'll do it. And then there's legislative incentives. So first we'll talk about just residential. Like in some communities, they've done programs where they'll reward people if they recycle. And where it's like a random drawing and they win a prize, that's a positive reinforcement. And then also there could be a negative reinforcement where there's a recycling cops, we call them lid flippers, where they're looking in the lids, inside the lids of these bins, and if somebody does something wrong, they get a ticket. And that can also motivate people to recycle correctly when they recycle. So that's another way, is to have legislation where you have to recycle correctly. That's something like that. But for businesses, that's what we do have laws on the book here in Kauaʻi, that haulers cannot bring more than 10% of cardboard, metals, or green waste that's commingled into a load, so that has to be diverted. They can't just dispose of these items at the landfill.
Can't just throw all their waste into the same bin.
Yeah, it's against the law. And so that's one way to make people recycle. And it's really easier to do with businesses than with people. And so in many communities, they have recycling legislation where they're requiring businesses to participate in recycling programs. And in our case, it's a landfill restriction. We don't call it a ban, but it's a restriction on what you bring to the landfill. It has to be correct, when you're bringing it in there, so you're not throwing away these things that can be recycled.
Well, that's good. And I feel like businesses are the ones that are easier to legislate easier to regulate, and also businesses are the ones that are generating much greater quantity.
Well, they're generating about half, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected.
Yeah. So it's on Kauaʻi. It's about half residential, half business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of businesses, because we have a large tourist economy here, and so places like resorts, they do have recycling programs because they're part of larger chains where that's their business ethic, and they are offering recycling, at their facilities, and there's programs in place. So that's good.
Which is great. We love to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do social norms shape our waste habits?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I want my instinct as an interviewer is to go into more detail, but I'm just going to leave it broad because it's a broad question.
Yeah, I think that recycling is something that is you can influence behavior through your peers, and so if you have a friend or a parent or a group that you are with and they're all recycling, then the chances are that you will be a recycler too. And so that's why, the show about preaching to the choir, like that's what you viewers or listeners could do, is if you really care about recycling, is to make sure that the people around you are recycling, and what you do is you put on the pressure. Why are you throwing that away? You confront people. Recycling police is what, we call each other, and is because you really got to confront people and ask them, like, why aren't you doing that? Or take it from them. Don't let them throw it away, and help them, go into their household and buy them a bin, or, offer to go out and get it and get paid back for whatever it is, but just set it up for them so that they're ready, set up for success. Yeah. And, if it's maybe somebody that needs help, like an elderly person or, somebody who's too busy to do it, then help them out or lead them to a place where they can do that, like another person that could help. And I find that in households, there's usually one person who's kind of the person in charge of recycling, who's driving that train and making sure it happens, and maybe they're doing everything, but as long as you have the person, then it's going to happen in that household.
Yeah, it was growing up. It was my mom was the one that was, and then now it's me.
So there have been studies too of this concept called the recycling block leader program, where you have neighborhoods where you are designating someone as the block leader who's talking to people about their recycling habits and going door to door and asking people if they'd be willing to take a pledge to recycle, and they'd be willing to, and this is especially for things like curbside where they have, you can see if people are recycling or not. Like in our program, it's kind of behind the curtain, right? People are doing it and they're driving out to the bins. You can see them when you're at the bins, but otherwise, but this is like a marker for curbside programs that my bin's out, that means I'm recycling. And so they found that when those programs are in place, that there's a significantly higher rate of recycling than if there isn't anybody watching or anybody keeping tabs on each other to actually do it.
Yeah, so nag your neighbors. It does make a difference. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of like a lot of times somebody's justification for not caring about something is, well, nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
But if everybody cares about it, then you should care about it too. So.
And it's hard to tell because I'm me, and I've been doing this for a long time and been caring about it for a long time and been in charge of it for a long time. But I really feel like you fit in when you recycle. There's not that many people that don't recycle that I'm seeing, Yeah. And so I think that, that is the ethic here on Kauaʻi, is to recycle. And one of the issues is, how available are public recycling systems or wherever you're at, besides at your home, like in your workplace, at your school, at your church, and if they're not there, then take the impetus on yourself and actually set it up. Because we on our website have have a page like how to set up a recycling program, and there's steps, and you can do those steps. And also, anyone can call our office at 808-241-4841 and get free guidance. And also, we'll come out to businesses. We do go out to businesses free of charge to look at what they've got going on and see how we can improve
That's great.
the recycling. Yeah,
That's great. I didn't know about that second part. That's cool.
yeah.
And, there's small scale stuff you can do too. Like if I'm out and about and I buy a can of soda or a can of Monster Energy drink, #not sponsored, or whatever, and I finish it and then there's no recycling anywhere, I just carry it with me until the next time I'm near my car.
Make sure you pour it out.
Chuck it in the car.
Chuck it in the car.
And eventually, at some point, I know my car is going to end up back at my house where I have recycling bins. So if you went out in the parking lot and looked at my Jeep right now, you'd see a couple empty cans in the back. But yeah, and that's easy. That's easy to do.
Pack your trash, right? You've seen that sticker, pack your trash.
Yeah,
that's
pack
what
it
you
in,
do.
pack it
Just
out.
pack it up. And that's interesting because when I first started studying just solid waste management and recycling, there was this professor at UCLA who would have people carry around their trash, for the day, and like, what are you generating, and really get to know their trash, and then dump it out on the table and like, okay, what's here? Like, what could I have not purchased? What could I have reused? What can I recycle? And then what's left,
Yeah, you know what? That's really interesting because actually that was sort of a revelatory, sort of a revelation for me that when I started camping a lot, and you bring an empty trash bag with you to the campsite and put your trash in there, and then you got to put that trash bag in your backpack and carry it back, and especially like if you hiked in to where you're camping, and then that'll start to change at least in that context of like I'm getting ready to go camping, that'll really change your behavior. Of like, well, what can I want to buy stuff that I'm not going to have to carry the garbage back out with me. And you start really thinking about.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem is that people really don't think about it. I mean, before you were saying, why don't people recycle? Because they don't really think about what happens when you throw stuff away, because there is no away. It is going here. Yeah. On island into the landfill if you're not recycling it. And so being more aware of what goes into your garbage and how you can keep stuff out of there is super important for being a good steward of our island.
Yeah, just considering the impact of your actions. Yeah,
that it's not just going to go away. It's not somebody else's problem. It's all of our problem and all of our responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I think anyone would agree that, like, hey, if you have this thing that you don't want anymore, is a responsible course of action to dig a hole in the ground, bury the thing, and then leave it there forever?
Yeah.
Like, you'd be like, no, that's dumb. Who would do that? And it's like, no, that's what we do, though. Yeah. So
that's so
let's
true.
Try to do that as little as possible.
Yeah, we should. And along those lines, I really, even though this isn't exactly what we're talking about, I do want to put a plug for reuse, guys, because we do have this really great reuse program, which, there's thrift stores out there, there's consignment stores. That's what we want to do first, is to let these nonprofits make money off reusable things, and then also to lightly worn items that you're just never going to wear, to let somebody else use them and maybe make a little money in the process. This is wonderful. But if you're moving your house and you got to downsize or whatever, that's what we're seeing now as people are like moving off island, or they're downsizing, or big life decisions are being made, people are dying, whatever, like, and you have to get rid of stuff. That we do have the Kauaʻi Resource Center in Lihue, where we have a reuse operation that will take a lot of stuff that thrift stores haven't been able to take. And it's been a really great program because that's still usable stuff that other people can use. And we have Goodwill that's running the program now, and they're consolidating stuff here on island, shipping it over to Oahu where it's getting reused, and then worldwide for things that they can't use there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I knew about some of those programs, but I didn't know that it was that robust.
Yes.
That's cool.
It's nuts, actually.
Do you think that shaming or praising people, and maybe specifically like public shaming, can actually change waste behavior.
That's funny because, you know, in psychology, we learn a lot about that, right? Positive and reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is supposed to work the best. Right. But I will tell you something, that when I was a little kid, and it's funny that I didn't plan on talking about this, but like I remember I went to Laguna Beach when I was really like maybe 8 or something, and I was eating a piece of gum and I like threw the package on the ground. Like, I don't even know. I don't remember littering as a child, but somehow this happened. Right. And somebody came up to me and were like, "What are you doing? We don't do that here. Pick that up. You're littering." And it was like, wow, that changed me. Like, I always thought about that afterwards. So I think shaming to a certain degree can be effective, especially with kids, you know, when they're learning these things. Like, you don't do that. What are you doing, you know? And I think people are maybe sometimes afraid these days to tell kids that they're not their kids what to do. Less so here, but in general. Yeah. But I think that's really good to make sure that kids know, you know, that you don't do that. You don't throw stuff around and you don't waste stuff, you know, and you're going to, you know, be responsible, right? Yeah. So there's a certain amount of that, but I think also, though, people might shut down if you're shaming them too much. Yeah. And the approach I would take, like if you're at a party and you're seeing everybody's throwing recyclables into the trash and you go up to the host, you don't want to embarrass them, but you would say something like, "Hey," instead of just like, "Why aren't you recycling? This is stupid." But you would say something like, "Hey, can I put this box out here and write recycling on it and take it for you this time, and then maybe next time you'll recycle?" Something like that, like helping, you know, and just approaching it from a positive perspective so that you're not getting people like offended or shutting down, and actually being open to something new.
Yeah, and that gives me more of a warm fuzzy too.
Yeah, yeah.
I would rather be nice than mean, but
yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting to, you know, maybe can being mean be helpful?
Yeah, it can be. It just depends on the situation. So I saw this special on CNN, and it was talking about certain musicians that are environmentally conscious, and that's their ethic, and they're moving that message out to the fans, not only in their music and certain aspects of the show, but also they're demanding when they go to venues that they have recycling bins, that they have composting bins, that there's clear messaging that they're not using plastic. Because what happened, and I'll name some of these, like first, the one that I am most familiar with is Jack Johnson, local Oahu North Shore surfer turned amazing musician who I've been following, you know, since the early 2000s, and he even has a song called Recycle, the 3R song, and he has so many great songs, but he has this event called the Kokua Foundation. It's a festival that he does, but he has created a foundation where they're really into sustainability, and his shows, they have recycling stations, and they have booths where people can pledge to recycle more and learn more about recycling programs in their area, and it's always been such a great thing, and he's been doing it since I think it's 2002. So I was really aware of Jack Johnson. They opened the show with that, but then they start talking about Billie Eilish, who is a huge, huge musician, and her mom is you know, with her, helping her, and you know, Billie and her mom are big environmentalists, and so Billie has all of these, you know, messages during her shows and demands that they have recycling options and better, you just not a bunch of plastic at the shows. Because what these musicians were doing is when they first became famous, they would do a show, then they'd look out at the arena after everyone left, and it was literally a sea of plastic. Yeah. And they don't want that, and so they're demanding, I want reusable cups, I want water filling stations, and you know, I want to make sure that my fans are recycling, and I want to tell them about recycling. And I just think, you know, even though musicians have a pretty small footprint, in the scheme of things, they're not doing anything terrible, but they have an amazing power to impact their fans.
Definitely. I mean, a lot more people listen to Billie Eilish than to Max and Allison. So,
Yeah, and so it really gave me a lot of hope, and I learned on the show too that a musician that I really love, Bonnie Raitt, was one of the pioneers in this area.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and this has started businesses that are actually going to venues and setting them up to be like zero waste venues.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's something that, there's Zero Waste here on Kauaʻi that did event recycling for years, and all their volunteers were out there hitting the pavement doing event recycling, and we've wanted that for so long. And to know that there's businesses and big venues like at stadiums and stuff that are setting this up is really exciting and good to hear.
Yeah, that's so great. That's one of those things that's kind of good for everybody. It's like there's businesses, people are making money off of it, and it's better for the venue, it makes musicians feel better, and it's better for the world, which is where we live. So. Well, that's it for part 1 of our discussion about the social psychology of recycling. Tune in next time for part 2. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and aloha.